The wind howled over the silent valley, kicking up a haze of ash and dust that shrouded the sun in a perpetual gloom. Gray shards of metal and twisted concrete bones jutted from the parched ground, remnants of a world once teeming with human ambition. In the center of this wasteland stood a weathered dome. Ravaged by centuries of storms and scorching heat, it loomed like a monument to lost technology. Inside, an ancient computer mainframe blinked and hummed, a tenuous lifeline between the present and a mysterious future. Those who still breathed in this harsh land believed the machine was an oracle, a harbinger of destiny that could forecast the path of every living soul. They called themselves the Devout, and every cycle they gathered within the dome to beseech the mainframe for guidance. Cloaked and wary, they approached the console with trembling reverence, offering tokens of salvage and whispered prayers. For them, the computer was no mere artifact. It was a god that spoke in cryptic bursts of glitched text, unlocking a shadowy glimpse of what lay ahead. Jorah, a lean woman with sunken cheeks and skin roughened by years of scavenging, served as a kind of priestess. She knew the console's workings better than most. Her father had taught her before he perished in a raider attack, passing down the secrets of how to read the flickering lines on the dusty monitors. She alone among the devout could interpret the green phosphorescent script that scrolled across the screen. The others believed she had visions stretching beyond the mortal coil, gleaned from the oracle's cryptic teachings. Once every lunar cycle, Jorah led a gathering. She stood on a platform in the dome's center, her eyes reflecting the machine's glow. A hush descended as she flicked a row of archaic switches, coaxing the mainframe to life. The hum reverberated through the chamber, rattling the scaffolding overhead. Specters of the old world danced on the battered monitors, lines of code rolling past. Then, in a metallic flutter, the machine displayed its cryptic message. It had no direct means of speech. It spoke in riddles that Jorah alone dared decipher. One dim afternoon, the devout arrived, weary from traversing the ashen dunes beyond the dome. Each carried a scrap offering: circuit boards, shards of plastic, wire spools. Their hope was that these broken pieces might feed the mainframe's appetite for old technology. The thick air was laced with anticipation as the worshippers knelt before the console. Jorah powered up the machine with careful precision, gently wiping away the grit that had collected on its knobs and keys. "Bless this offering," she whispered, plugging in a salvaged component. The mainframe's fans whirred, and green code flickered like lightning on its screen. The crowd stood still. Jorah scanned the lines and took in the machine's message, generic bursts of machine language, interspersed with the faint outlines of words in a language long forgotten. Then, all at once, a short phrase appeared that Jorah knew well. "Calc process complete. Initiate prediction." She pressed a final button. With a crackle of static, the oracle typed out, "Winter's death arrives in 7 rise. Seek the waiters of hope." The assembly watched the monitor, perplexed. Jorah's eyes widened. "Winter's death?" she repeated softly. Within their world, winter was a memory of a time when ice and cold storms dominated. But no true winter had come for nearly a decade. Instead, searing sun and foul dust storms had tormented them. The phrase "waters of hope" ignited something in her heart. Water had grown scarce, forcing them to raid old aquifers and hoard stale droplets in battered jugs. Was there a place brimming with fresh water, something beyond their brittle horizon? She recited the oracle's message to the crowd gathered behind her. Whispers of hope and disquiet mingled among them. Some believed the oracle's words promised salvation, while others feared it warned of doom. They left quietly, returning to their meager shelters under the battered metal frames around the dome, painting the prophecy into their dreams and nightmares alike. As darkness clung to the sky, Jorah couldn't sleep. She sipped from her ration of tepid water and paced the dome's corridors, searching for further clues among the oracle's battered databanks. She read lines of code that spilled out broken, puzzling references to climate shifts, underground reservoirs, geological anomalies. She found only partial data, incomplete progress logs that might have been used to predict resource distribution before the cataclysm. It hinted at an old aquifer far beyond the valley, Yet it left her uncertain whether that data held any truth now, after centuries of upheaval. Days passed with the same grinding repetition, and the oracle remained quiet. Jorah's mind grew restless. From time to time, she heard the other devout chanting softly outside the dome, calling upon the mainframe to reveal more. She wondered if she should undertake a journey, guided by the fleeting hint of water. Doubt nipped at her. Abandoning the dome would mean leaving behind the oracle, the foundation of their entire community's function and faith. Yet a thirst for answers, almost a holy duty to fulfill the prophecy, stirred inside her as powerfully as hunger. At last, wreathed by the dust-laden twilight, Jorah announced her plan to the devout. "I will follow the oracle's counsel," she said, standing among them with her hands raised. "It's said to seek the waters of hope. I cannot ignore this sign. We are dying of thirst. Despair chokes us daily. If there is anywhere left with water, we must go and see." A trembling hush followed. Then Revik, a barrel-chested scavenger with scars winding across his arms, spoke up. "If you leave, what will become of us?" "We rely on the oracle's words." An ancient man with cataracts, whom all called the Elder, gripped his walking staff. "This is fate," he rasped. "The oracle said winter's death arise in 7 rises. That means we are meant to endure a great trial culminating in either revival or oblivion. Let her go, child Revik, to find these waters. Our faith in the machine demands we do not stand in the way." Still, Jorah sensed the tension swirling among the devout. It was no small thing for their interpreter to depart. She promised her return, or, failing that, to send a sign. So that night, she prepared what meager supplies she had: a ragged canvas pack, her father's rusted machete, and a small flask that had once contained purified water. Then, at dawn, she set off under the ashen sky, bearing the oracle's riddle in her heart. She trudged through the sprawling wasteland, storms of dust swirling at her ankles and stinging her eyes. Twice she encountered roving raiders in the distance. She hid behind the hulls of destroyed vehicles, praying they would not find her. On the third night, beneath the flickering cosmos, she glimpsed a faint glow in the distance. Where there was light, there might be signs of life, but whether friend or foe remained unclear. Driven by curiosity and necessity, she moved toward it, crouching behind ruined structures until the faint glimmer became discernible. A half-buried gas station from the old times, battered neon tubing flickering in the blackness. Sheltered by its collapsed overhang, a group of travelers huddled around a makeshift fire. They wore battered leather, their eyes hollow. Nearby, an aged generator coughed fumes, powering the flickering sign overhead. They spotted her quickly, for her shape was silhouetted by the sparse moonlight. One of them rose, brandishing a sharpened rod. "State your business, wanderer." Jorah approached cautiously, machete lowered to indicate no threat. "I'm just passing by. I only seek water." "A rumor? She hesitated, uncertain if these people would scorn talk of prophecies in ancient machines. "I heard there might be a well or reservoir out this way." The travelers exchanged glances. Then an older woman sat forward, her tone tinged with weariness and curiosity. "There are rumors, but nothing we've seen for ourselves." There was a flicker of recognition, a sense that Jorah was not the first to pass this way, chasing old legends. "We came from the city's husk to the south. Didn't find anything but rubble and poison. Now we're drifting east. If we see water, we'll likely keep it for ourselves." "That's how it is." Jorah nodded slowly. "I understand. The world has forced us to be this way." She glanced at the half-empty water jug by their fire. "Do you have enough to spare a mouthful? I'll give something in return." A brief negotiation followed. She offered a small circuit board from a defunct radio. In exchange, they permitted her a few gulps. The water was stale, but it saved her from deeper pangs of thirst. She shared her plan to find the rumored aquifer, and in turn they told her of old maps they'd glimpsed. "Far to the northeast," said one traveler, "there used to be a facility. Maybe that's where you'll find your supply." She thanked them and drifted off into the night, forging deeper into the unknown. Each day that followed was an ordeal of relentless sun and scorching wind. Jorah's lips cracked, her feet blistered, and her senses blurred in the swirling grit of the atmosphere. Only her faith in the oracle and her determination carried her forward. If she succumbed, she would never learn the truth. The devout, her people would face whatever new trial threatened them without the hope of relief. By sheer will, she stumbled onto a battered road that led to an imposing concrete arch half collapsed across a pile of rubble. Rusted letters overhead spelled out something she could barely read: National Research FAC. The rest had been torn away, devoured by time. Broken gates hung nearby. Beyond them, a slope led into a dark plaza strewn with debris. This place felt ancient, far older than the illusions of modern civilization had once promised. But it also tugged at her with the faint possibility that somewhere inside, water might yet lie hidden. Night fell as she crept through the cracked entrance. She found the remains of a courtyard and the toppled skeletons of metal benches. Announcements clothed in a language she could not fully decipher were posted on rotting boards. She rummaged deeper until she found a shattered hallway leading underground. Her hand shook as she activated a small glow stick, an artifact she had kept for emergencies. In the sickly light, the corridor seemed endless, the walls lined with flickering caution markings. At last, she heard a dull trickle, a single drop of moisture hitting concrete. Her heart fluttered. Somewhere beyond the collapsed structure, there must be a reservoir. She navigated fallen beams, scraping her knees on jagged metal. Then she discovered a sealed door with a keypad. The keypad no longer lit up, but the door looked freshly disturbed. She wondered if previous wanderers had forced it open. Hammering with the butt of her machete, she struck until the door gave way. On the other side, darkness reigned, but a faint, cool breeze carrying the scent of damp earth caressed her parched skin. She stepped through, breath stilled. In the glow of her feeble light, she saw a chamber, the remains of an underground lab or vault with collapsed pipes overhead. Water dripped methodically into a cracked basin built into the floor. A ghostly hush filled the air. Kneeling, she cupped the pitiful stream in her hands and sipped. The water was lukewarm and faintly metallic, but to her it tasted like salvation. She filled her flask, eyes stinging with tears of relief. Was this the waters of hope the oracle had foretold? A meager trickle wouldn't quench an entire community's thirst for long. But perhaps deeper within the facility, behind the tangles of collapsed steel, more significant supplies existed. She had come too far to settle for a handful of droplets. The next hours were a tangle of exploration. She crawled through half-collapsed tunnels, testing every sealed hatch, pressing every defunct control panel. Occasionally, she found broken machinery with faint signs of residual electricity humming through battered wiring. This place must once have harnessed advanced technology, perhaps of a similar pattern to the Oracle's mainframe. At the end of a labyrinthine passage, she found another console, a chunk of it missing from some catastrophic event. But enough remained to reveal flickering lines of code. Eyes wide, she approached. She recognized the style of the interface as akin to the Oracle's. Something within her quickened. This system was ancient, but it might hold records, maybe store data about water reserves or research conducted prior to the cataclysm. She flipped a switch on the battered console. Static flared, then lines of corrupted text scrolled across the screen. Desperate to glean any insights, she typed simple commands. Miraculously, the system responded, though the text displayed was broken and incomplete. She deciphered bits of information about experimental climate control attempts, subterranean water tables. The old world had tried to preserve life by storing water in hidden pockets, anticipating the planetary meltdown that eventually came. The records were partial, incomplete, but referenced an aqua vault located deeper in the facility. If it remained intact, it could house enough water to safeguard the devout for generations. Adrenaline coursed through her. Her father had taught her rudimentary hacking techniques. With trembling fingers, she input the commands to open the sealed vault. The console spat out a location coordinates within the subterranean levels. It warned of structural instability, contamination hazards, and partial flooding, none of which mattered if there was hope of success. Summoning courage, she followed minimal directions to a freight elevator shaft. The elevator itself lay smashed at the bottom, but a trembling set of maintenance ladders led down. She descended carefully, rung by rung, the echo of dripping water steadily growing louder. At last, she arrived in a sublevel corridor that angled downward. Pools of water at times lapped at her ankles. Then at her waist, she held the glow stick high, wading through the gloom, guided by an intermittent overhead light that flickered in a malfunctioning dance. Then the corridor ended at another sealed door, marked with an emblem of rippling water and lines of text in a lost language. The door was stuck partially open, jagged metal edges twisted by the cataclysm. She squeezed through, thighs scraping. On the other side lay a vast chamber, half submerged in a waist-deep lake that glistened with reflected light from above. Structures of metal catwalks crisscrossed the chamber. Some collapsed, others precariously balanced. Water trickled from pipes overhead, feeding the reservoir that spread across the floor. The stale air reeked of algae and rust. Her heart swelled at the sight of so much water. It was not a mere puddle or drip. Here was a veritable underground lake. She had to test its quality, ensure it wasn't irradiated or salted beyond drinkable levels. But any water at all here was a miracle. If the oracle's prophecy was true, she had found the waters of hope. Contamination was possible, but with proper filtering and care, it might sustain her people. She knelt and tentatively scooped up a handful. Though it smelled faintly metallic, it lacked the acrid tang of poison. She tasted a tiny drop, not wanting to overexpose herself. It was bitter, but she suspected filters with the correct materials could purify it. Relief and gratitude coursed through her, and memories of the oracle's words glowed in her mind. She felt certain that this was the salvation the machine had predicted. In that moment, she longed to ignite a flare, send a beacon to her people, and share the discovery. But she knew the journey here was perilous, studded with raiders and countless hazards. She would have to return, guide them carefully. With a trembling sigh, she turned to leave, determined to reach the surface and eventually journey back to the dome with the news. If she hurried, she might arrive before the prophecy's cryptic mention of Winter's death, a time she could not fully interpret. She reached out to brace herself against the corroded metal railing as she stepped, and that was when she heard voices from the corridor behind her. Her blood froze. The echo suggested at least 2 or 3 individuals. She realized with dawning dread that she had not been the first or only one to sense the presence of water here. Raiders or desperate travelers might have tracked her. If they discovered the reservoir, there could be bloodshed. She crouched behind a fallen beam, eyes scanning for a hiding place. Torchlight flickered on the walls. The voices drew nearer, hard and low. Then she spotted them. 2 men and 1 woman in patched armor, their expressions grim. They carried guns fashioned from scavenged parts. In the gloom, one stepped forward and saw the water. A hushed expletive burst from his lips. "Jackpot," he said with mingled awe and greed. The woman sized up the lake, her expression darkening. "Think the rest of the crew will want to cut. We'll have to defend this place." Jorah held her breath. If these raiders claimed the reservoir for themselves, they might slaughter anyone who approached, including the devout. She could not let that happen, but she was just one person. Her machete was no match for guns. Heart pounding, she tried to ease away unnoticed. Her foot slipped against a piece of metal, sending it clattering. The raiders swung around, beams of light searching the chamber. One barked, "Who's there?" She dove across the catwalk, narrowly avoiding a shot. The bullet ricocheted off the metal, sending sparks flying. A surge of adrenaline propelled her forward. She dashed along the catwalk, the passage back to the corridor just within reach. Another shot whined by, grazing the railing near her fingertips. She clutched her machete, but her top priority was escape. She carried crucial knowledge. She would never survive a protracted fight with these armed scavengers. She managed to scramble through the door, ignoring the pain in her ribs as she squeezed past the twisted metal. The footsteps behind her were close. She sprinted through the corridor, water splashing around her shins, occasionally stumbling. She gritted her teeth, fear pulsing. Behind her, curses and shouts echoed. The raiders clambered through the submerged tunnel, but it appeared they cared more about securing the reservoir than pursuing her through every corridor. She prayed it gave her the chance she needed. She hurried up the ladder, her arms burning. Reaching ground level, she accessed the battered console once more. For a fleeting moment, she considered destroying it, to ensure no further directions to the water could be gleaned. But she lacked time. The best she could do was smash the keypad. With the butt of her machete, she cracked it, hoping that would dissuade others from easily following. Then she ran, not stopping until the first rays of dawn broke across the horizon. Her lungs screamed for air, her limbs felt ready to collapse, but she remembered the oracle's words, "Winter's death arrives in 7 rises." She had spent nearly 4 rises reaching the facility. If the prophecy held, she had 3 more. She had to share her discovery and rally the devout to claim the underground reservoir before the raiders expanded their hold. On her trek home, she encountered more obstacles. Swirling dust storms, the same gaunt travelers from before who had nothing left to share. She bartered away most of her personal tokens for a few drops of water. Yet her spirit soared, fueled by the knowledge she alone possessed. She was determined that the devout guided by the oracle she revered would not perish in thirst, but strive for a future in which water flowed freely again. By the 6th day, she spotted the dome looming through the haze. Relief mingled with anxiety as she approached. She feared the possibility that the prophecy had already played out in her absence, but the swirling lines of smoke from the community's fires meant they still held on. Bursting through the dome's gates, she found the devout assembled, their faces peaked with worry. The elder, leaning heavily on his staff, stepped forward. "Jorah, you have returned. Thank the oracle. What news do you bring?" She knelt, exhaustion etched into her every word. "I found it," she whispered. "The waters of hope, but we must go soon. Raiders have discovered it as well. If we do not seize the chance, we may lose it forever." The crowd gasped, and a ripple of excitement overcame them. Families hugged each other, the children's eyes gleamed with renewed wonder. Revik, his gaze intent, asked, "But can we trust it? Is it truly our salvation?" Jorah stood with resolve. "The oracle spoke truth. I have seen it. Enough water to nourish us for years if we protect it. The time is now." She recounted the details of her journey, describing the facility's structure and the threat posed by the raiders. The devout listened in rapt silence. The elder raised his staff. "We must heed the oracle's prophecy. Winter's death was but a metaphor for the end of this endless drought of spirit and water." His rheumy eyes shone. "At the next dawn, we depart. We gather our meager weapons, our vessels, our faith. We water caravans with courage. Today, the oracle's message is fulfilled." They left behind the dome with both reverence and sadness. For generations, it had been their sanctuary of worship. They carried with them copies of the mainframe's old readouts, as well as small salvageable parts to keep the oracle operational once they resettled. A pilgrimage of the desperate set out across the wasteland, a thread of humanity clinging to hope. Even the children grasped the significance of this moment, marching bravely despite the howling wind. Jorah led them with unwavering resolve. As the 7th dawn arrived, the 7th rise, the 7th rise. From the oracle's words, they reached the threshold of the ruined research facility. The journey left them weary, but the promise of water spurred them onward. In the courtyard, they encountered evidence of a struggle. The raiders had clearly been battling among themselves, or perhaps with some other group. 2 corpses lay in the open, unburied. Jorah's pulse quickened. She prayed those left behind would be too weakened or scattered to repel her people. She guided the devout down through corridors, stepping over debris and wading through the partially flooded passages. Fear pulsed in the children's eyes, yet eagerness kept them moving. At last, they arrived at the vault door. The twisted metal parted just enough for passage. Their torches revealed the subterranean lake ahead. Gasps erupted at the vast expanse of water shining in the darkness. But shapes emerged on a catwalk. 6 raiders, battered from conflict, wearing savage grins. They raised Scavet's firearms. One barked a warning, "Back off! This is ours!" Jorah felt the devout's faith surge behind her. Even the elder stepped forward, defiant. "This is our chance at life. The oracle has decreed." A shot rang out. The bullet struck the catwalk near their feet, sparking violently. Chaos threatened. The devout cowered, uncertain of how to proceed. Jorah's mind raced, her heart hammered. She recalled the day she had escaped these same raiders. Now they had the advantage in numbers and weaponry, but the devout had the advantage of desperation. They had come too far to abandon this miracle. Revik seized a piece of metal piping, his voice echoing in the cavern. "Enough talk. If they want to fight, we'll give 'em one." Some among the devout armed themselves with scavenged weapons, battered clubs, sharpened rods. A tense standoff held for seconds that felt like minutes. Then the raiders opened fire in a rattling salvo. Chaos exploded across the cavern. Devout men and women surged forward, driven by the primal will to survive. Shots cracked and reverberated, echoing across the water. Jorah ducked, pulling the elder behind a piece of collapsed scaffolding. From there, she saw Revik and a few others rush the raiders, swinging their makeshift weapons. The bullets tore through some of them, though a few raiders fell under the onslaught. The air was thick with gun smoke, screams, and flailing bodies tumbling into the shallow edges of the lake. A stray shot sparked against the overhead pipes, sending them rattling. A cascade of water drizzled from the damaged pipe, intensifying the gloom. The stench of gunpowder and damp metal permeated the air. With her gut twisting, Jorah realized that, no matter the cost, the devout must triumph here or face extinction. She clenched her machete, taking a deep breath. As the raiders reloaded, she sprinted forward, the machete raised. One of them spotted her too late. She struck with all her strength, forcing him backwards. Another member of the devout tackled a second raider from behind, plunging a sharpened rod into his back. The woman raider who had first discovered the reservoir shouted curses, pivoting to fire again, but her gun jammed with a metallic rasp. Seizing the chance, Revik slammed into her, sending the pair over the catwalk's railing, plunging into the water below. Finally, the gunfire ceased. The survivors of the raiders either lay dead or clung to catwalk edges, grievously wounded. The devout panted, battered but victorious. The chilly water below rippled with echoes of violence. Mourning for their own who had fallen, they collectively slumped in exhaustion. But as the dust settled, a sense of deliverance swelled within the chamber. The vault belonged to them. More importantly, so did the water. Hope had taken root amid carnage. Faint rays of sunlight filtered through the opening behind them, glinted on the rippling surface like tiny sparks of resurrection. Several of the devout waded into the reservoir, checking for deeper pockets, testing the water. In hushed awe, they realized just how vast it could be. Enough to allow them to thrive, and perhaps more. Jorah knelt, tears in her eyes, letting the droplets slide over her fingers. The elder approached, placing a trembling hand on her shoulder. "You have delivered us," he said, "and the oracle's word has come to pass. The winter, the season of despair, has..." Jorah nodded. She thought of the ancient mainframe back in the dome, still quietly humming. It was more than a deity to them. It was a relic of human knowledge, an instrument of guidance. Perhaps they would return for it, or build a new seat of worship here, connecting it to the data systems that still functioned. She was no longer certain if the oracle was truly divine, or merely a vestige of advanced computation, but it had spoken truly. In 7 rises, they had found life. They had confronted violence, endured grief, yet triumphed with a new beginning in their grasp. She closed her eyes, a silent prayer passing her lips. The oracle had shown prophecy through lines of flickering code, bridging the distance between man and machine. And in that moment, as the murmur of water enveloped them, she believed that perhaps hope itself was a machine, an engine fueled by the will to persevere, stitching together humanity's broken pieces to face what lay ahead. One by one, the devout knelt and cupped the water in their hands, letting it wash away the dust of the dead world. In this ruined realm, faith and technology intertwined, forging an improbable path forward. Precisely as the oracle had predicted, and though the wasteland beyond still stretched, haunted and punishing, they had discovered a promise that would keep them alive. A flicker of free-flowing water, a crack in the fortress of despair, a chance to endure until a new sun rose once more.